series, and this will be our final weekly webinar for 2025. So thanks for taking the time to join us today. We're so glad you're here. We have another important topic. My colleague Hope Alwine will be presenting today on WCAG, Beyond Basic Accessibility, a Neurodiversity Lens. So I'll cover a couple of housekeeping items first, and then we will jump right into the presentation. So first thing to know is we will be recording the session, so you can find it later on our YouTube channel, or if you registered, you will receive an email with a link to that as well. We will be using the chat function in Zoom to take audience questions at the end. Questions can be certainly related to today's topic, but also related to other things in the digital accessibility space. So feel free to use that to reach out. Second thing is also keep an eye on the chat for a coupon code for a 1-month free trial of our RAMP software. And I think that's it for now. I will go ahead and pass it off to Hope, and we can go ahead and start recording.
Thanks, Heather. So again, my name is Hope Alwine. I'm a digital accessibility specialist here at Accessible Web, and today we are going to be covering Beyond Basic Accessibility, WCAG through a Neurodiversity Lens. I'm going to go ahead and warn you that I have been tripping over the words neurodiversity and neurodivergent, so please be patient with me. So we are going to cover the definition of neurodiversity and neurodivergent in this presentation, and then do a basic overview of the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which is WCAG. And then we're going to do kind of a deep dive into concepts that are recommended to be aware of when you are working with neurodiversity environments and the success criteria that are related to them from WCAG. And then we'll do a kind of a wrap up with neurodiversity and inclusive design. See, there you go. All right, let's get started. So first things first, what is neurodiversity? The term was originally coined in 1990 by Australian sociologist Judy Singer. It is a concept embraced in both sociology and psychology, emphasizing social aspects over medical terminology. Singer wrote about the concept in her 1998 sociology thesis, bringing a new perspective to light, positing that people with different brain types are not abnormal, but bring different skills to the table. The paradigm shift was then continued by Dr. Nick Walker, with the changing of traditional views on the normal brain versus atypical brains. So neurodiversity views the variations in the human brain as a natural condition, whereas individuals a mix of distinctive strengths and weaknesses rather than inherent limitations. The way I tend to think of neurodiversity is that there's more than one way to solve a problem. Think about when you're putting a puzzle together. Some people like to build the border first, while others prefer to dive right into the center. Me personally, match pieces with the image provided, and sometimes I switch gears and start matching the actual shape of the puzzle pieces to the puzzle itself. The end goal is the same, but how you get there is up to the individual. And there are some people that get very frustrated with puzzles, while others find them very relaxing. Now we're going to look at neurodivergent. In terms of the puzzle analogy, let's look at some conditions that are labeled as neurodivergent and how that fits into the scheme of neurodiversity. The Cleveland Clinic definition is neurodivergent is a non-medical term that describes people whose brains develop or work differently for some reason. This means the person has different strengths and struggles from people whose brains develop or work more typically. While some people who are neurodivergent have medical conditions, it also happens to people where medical conditions or diagnosis haven't been identified. So neurodivergent is not a one-size-fits-all definition. It can include many more conditions that are labeled within this presentation. Neurodivergent should not be put in a negative connotation, but rather a different approach to a traditional thought process. Let's look at some common conditions that are considered neurodivergent. First one being the autism spectrum disorder, or ASD, which is a range of complex brain developmental conditions that can affect social skills, cause sensory issues, and often lead to a narrow range of focused interests. There's also attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD, which is a developmental disorder primarily characterized by a pattern of inattention, hyperactivity, and impulsivity. And these next three I will be mispronounced. I apologize for that. First one being dyslexia, which is characterized by an impaired ability to read and recognize written language. There's also dysgraphia, which is difficulties with expressing thoughts through written language and impaired ability to understand handwritten language. And finally, dyscalculia, which is an impaired ability to understand, learn, and communicate mathematical concepts. So now let's look at this is going to be a very basic overview of WCAG. WCAG is the set of guidelines to make websites and digital products usable for people with different disabilities, including those who are neurodivergent. There are 3 levels of conformance within WCAG, including A, AA, and AAA. A is the minimum requirement, where AAA is the highest. Most legislation and regulations require at least WCAG version 2.1 AA levels. WCAG is based on the POUR principle, which are perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. For more in-depth information regarding WCAG, we do have other webinars, as well as our Manual Audit Monday series, which goes through each success criteria. Let's look at some of the recommendations for creating inclusive, neurodiverse environments within your websites or products so they can be utilized by a wider audience. We're going to discuss concepts that are essential to neurodiversity and then the related WCAG success criteria associated with each one and why it is important. So we're going to start with plain language, which is the basic concept is keep the content simple, avoid technical jargon, and make sure that the language of the page or parts. The 2 success criteria that are related to this concept is 3.1.1, language of page. It's important for assistive technologies to be able to identify the language and change internal settings so it can be read properly. Imagine if you're listening to a page that is in Spanish, but your screen reader isn't reading it in English. It's probably going to sound a little bit weird. The second one is 3.1.5, reading level. While it is a AAA success criteria, the idea is that web content should be at a basic reading level, so it doesn't matter how much education you have or if you have difficulty reading, you can still understand the content. The second concept is the ability to extend time requirements. So if possible, avoid time limits, but if it's required, make sure that there is a way to extend time if needed. The success criteria related to this one is 2.2.1, timing adjustable. Not everybody processes information at the same rate. So if there is a time requirement for something like filling out a form or completing a task, it is required to be able to extend that time or pause it. Our third concept is having alternate forms of the same content. Content should have secondary formats to ensure that everybody can engage with it. There are 3 success criteria that I've identified for this one. First one being 1.1.1, which is non-text content. All images and non-text content need to have a text alternative, unless it's a decorative element or it meets an exception criteria like logos. Another good thing to consider is for graphs or infographics to have a data table with the data or having a figure that describes the content in text. The next 2 success criteria kind of go hand in hand. It's 1.2.2, captions, and 1.2.5, audio description. The principle is being able to represent your video in text or with audio descriptions is helpful for neurodiversity, as some people learn differently. I personally hated watching videos in school and I didn't learn a lot from them. I digest information better through text and did a lot of pausing and writing notes during videos when I was in school. Moving on to our next set of concepts our first one being consistency. So keeping multiple use content items in the same location and having the same labels like navigation menus is vital. There's two success criteria that go hand in hand again. We have 3.2.3 consistent navigation and 3.2.4 consistent identification. These two success criteria ensure that information is consistent. So components like navigation stay in the same place, they have the same names. Consistency is more valuable than most people realize when it comes to neurodiversity, as think of it as kind of a building block that prevents distractions and keeps things predictable. Our next concept is to avoid physical reactions. Ensure that there is a way to pause or hide moving content like GIFs or videos. The success criteria, there's two separate success criteria for this one. There's 2.2.2, which is pause, stop, and hide. And I can tell you personally, having the ability to pause moving objects on websites is very important to me. The ability to pause is invaluable. You never know how motion can impact a user. Even if it's just a marquee where text is scrolling across the screen, it can be very distracting and even off-putting to some people. And then the second success criteria is 2.3.1, 3 flashes or below threshold. This was originally intended for epilepsy type conditions where flashing lights can trigger adverse physical reactions, but constant motion can distract and cause problems with other neurodivergent conditions like ADHD. And our last concept is ensuring that are identified and easily correct. Make sure that form fields have good instructions and proper error messages and suggestions. The two success criteria that go with this one is 3.3.1, error identification. We've all been there where you're trying to fill out a form and you hit submit and then an error pops up. It's frustrating. The difference is that for neurodivergent people, especially ones with autism, it can cause more problems than you traditionally think, as it disrupts more than one process for them. Make sure instructions are clear and errors are quickly identified through text. And 3.3.3, error suggestion. Error suggestion makes it easier to see a correct format for fields like email or phone numbers, and then the user can easily fix their area and move on without any more interruption. And that concludes some of the success criteria. This is not an exhaustive list. This was just some of the ones that have been easily identified that it fits within the neurodiversity lens. So we've covered a lot in this webinar, and I want to wrap it up with some key points to consider when designing an inclusive environment for neurodiverse people. First, recognize that every brain works differently, and keeping options open and considering multiple perspectives is key to design. Second, user testing is invaluable for gathering feedback and incorporating diverse user experiences into product development. Third, integrating accessibility from the start expands product reach to a wider audience. And last, focus on the valuable skills and unique viewpoints users bring rather than perceived deficiencies. And that wraps up my presentation. Again, we will have how accessible web can help. And we offer RAMP. We also have our webinars and other educational components like our, I'm sorry, I completely lost my train of
No
thought.
worries. I can jump right in here. So yeah, I dropped a coupon code for Ramp, which is our platform. So it's kind of the fantastic central way to manage your accessibility strategy. It offers automated tools as well as a structure for your manual approach. We also obviously offer services and consulting. So if you have any accessibility needs, no matter what they are, please reach out, and we're happy to chat about your unique use case. And thank you both, Heather, for this fantastic, Heather and Hope, for this fantastic presentation today. This was awesome. This is such an interesting kind of developing topic in the accessibility space. Certainly one that I love that is being talked about more and is getting so much attention in recent years. And I think it's going to help people across the board, which is really the intention of web accessibility done right, is that it doesn't just help people who have diagnosed or specific disabilities, but it helps everybody have a better and more seamless user experience in the digital spaces. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Hope. That was really informative. Can be a topic that has in the past been overlooked and is super important. So I'm glad we're bringing it to the forefront here. We are going to use the Zoom chat. So if you do have questions, thoughts, ideas, suggestions for us to discuss, feel free to drop those in now,
Yeah.
and we will go ahead and read those out and answer them to the best of our ability.
Yes, please drop your questions in chat, whether it's about today's presentation or about more broad accessibility topics. Please let us know, and we're happy to talk about it during webinar office hours here. Yeah. It was really interesting. I think it's interesting to think about too, the inclusion of neurodiversity in 3.0, which is something that I'm kind of curious about. I know that it's something that's being also thought about and included in the development of the next iteration of accessibility standards here. Yeah. Okay. For accessibility with a neurodivergence lens, is there anything to consider when it comes to search bars in websites or applications or the help option? Hmm. Here's your thoughts, Hope.
Well, there is actually a WCAG criteria. It is, I want to say, looking back at my notes, hold on just 1 second, and I will give you the correct number. It's in the same line as consistent navigation and consistent identification through,
Yep.
so 3.3.2, 3.2 point 3 or 4, where if you are going to have a help feature, it is required to be in the same spot at across pages. So if you have like a chat widget, we have
Mhm.
one on Ramp, so it has to be in the same spot at the same spot on different pages. I'm sorry. Um, so that, and for search bars, I know people are kind of moving towards just using the icon as kind of the visible label, which that is acceptable and it's not a failure, but having a text representation of letting people know that this is a search box, that's also very beneficial. And we could go into the deep dive of single search box versus multiple search boxes in advance, but I'm going to stop. I'm used to be a librarian, so that is a hot topic in that field.
Yeah, thank you. I think in my mind, what I would focus on if you're thinking about this without getting into like the technical success criteria is consistency and
Yeah.
common usage. So you want to make sure it is as widely understandable by the broadest audience possible and is consistently used across your website or application, so that you're not offering kind of varying and confusing experiences there.
Yep.
Yeah, and also it's Heather here. I would just add to that. I noticed, Hope, that you were mentioning, multiple means of being able to identify it, right? So there is sort of a universal icon, the magnifying glass that lets us know, but then also having a visible label that says search is just, by providing multiple options, you're just accommodating for um, different ways of identifying information from different brains. And I imagine that also helps with assistive technology processing of the information as well. So,
Awesome.
yeah.
Thank you. Is dark mode always a win for neurodiversity, or are there specific WCAG success criteria for color and light that we should prioritize first? Um, I will give my opinion just from watching our team develop some dark mode content in-house, is that you want to make sure that any dark mode that you launch meets all WCAG success criteria first and foremost. It's not a win if it's not accessible fully, if it doesn't maintain proper contrast, for example, and is just kind of added as an afterthought feature. It might be, preferred and helpful in some neurodiversity contexts, but then if you can't actually read what's on the page, it's not super helpful. But I'd love to hear your expert opinion, Hope, here, as you have a WCAG knowledge about the success criteria implied.
Well, definitely. I mean, dark mode can be helpful, but if it's not reaching sufficient color contrast ratios,
Hmm.
off, text still needs to reach 4.5 to 1 contrast ratio, and then all other components need to have at least a 3 to 1. So if you have an icon that's, whether it's magnifying glass or a trash can icon, that still needs to reach 3 to 1. contrast. And yeah.
Yeah. And there's actually a kind of comment in chat that I think is directly related to this point too. Well, not directly, but it ties in nicely here, which is that designing for neurodivergent folks can include structuring visual elements to help maintain attention and preserve a sense of precision within the presentation. Sometimes the features that most help one neurodivergent person may make things more difficult for another. Design for flexible interaction can benefit both, allowing personalization and customization. Can you please say more about these aspects of designing for access? We tend to promote designing towards the lowest common denominator rather than designing multiple rich experiences. And I think this is interesting because I think it
Yeah.
speaks to like this is some of the kind of core goals of doing web accessibility correctly is that you're offering a flexible experience that works for the broadest user set and offers the most accessible experience possible while maintaining that flexibility and operability across different user experiences. But I'd love your thoughts here too.
I mean, off the top of my head, I mean, yeah, part of the reason why WCAG was developed in the first
Mhm.
place is so that you can have that flexibility because there's success criteria dealing with like resizing text and also reflow. So being able to zoom in so that low vision users can still be able to read the text, but also if it's not reaching sufficient contrast, then it's kind of a moot point. So,
Yeah,
uh, yeah, having that flexibility and also just maintaining simplicity, that also helps. I know that as things develop and, complexity, more websites are adding more and more elements, and then
yeah,
there's more interactivity. And sometimes going back to basics is really a good way to keep that flexibility, but also just kind of cut down on the clutter. Just because while you want to have, that interactive functionality, you also have to think that sometimes less is more.
Yeah, it's Heather here. I'll just add to that. I think, and Gianna, you alluded to this, but really having that flexibility and ability to meet folks from where, however they're coming to
Mhm.
your content. I mean, it's really at the heart of universal design
Yes.
in general. And so we probably even want to avoid saying things, like always or never, right, in this particular context. And we do want to make things as broadly usable as possible. Um,
I agree. Yeah, I mean, internally, when we're having conversations with our clients and customers, we try to, especially when we're talking about kind of prioritizing remediations after an audit, we avoid ever focusing specifically on one disability or one specific user experience set because this is it's absolutely critical that you're offering those flexible, robust experiences for users across the board, so that they can use your product application however they show up to it. So while there may be, and this is the point, while there may be a feature that is super helpful for one person, it could be a WCAG failure or because it presents a major barrier to another person. And in that case, it's probably not a good solution to add into the product because ultimately you want to refer back to those kind of foundational guidelines so that you're offering that really core flexible user experience for everybody who's arriving there. And then if a user has like a very custom specification, maybe they can add that to their own device, and hopefully your website or application works well and seamlessly with whatever modifications or assistive technology they are bringing to it. Yeah. Okay.
Um, I
Oh, yeah.
I think we missed a question from earlier in
I
the
was
in the
about to I
chat.
was about to hit
Okay.
that one. How would you get leadership to focus on neurodivergence as a segment of accessibility rather than more physical disabilities? Exceeding WCAG baselines to deliver exceptional experiences. So one thing I'd say is I would look at WCAG 2 AAA for those kind of exceptional experiences for specific user sets because that's a really great way to go above and beyond kind of the core requirements in WCAG single or double A and single A and include some features or kind of user elements that really can take it above and beyond for the specific population you are striving to serve without compromising the other experiences for other users. Does that sound like sound advice to you guys for one good way to sort of think about going above and beyond just the requirements and into kind of even something better?
Yeah, it absolutely does. And that is a caveat to be careful of is, not designing too narrowly,
Hmm.
right? We've talked about that already. Um, so yeah, I think that's good advice. And in addition to that, I would say, I mean, if you really want people to have the best experience possible, get users in there, stakeholders at all levels throughout the process with disabilities who are interacting with this content, and take that feedback and incorporate it early and often throughout your process. And I mean, that's really sort of the pinnacle of providing an exceptional experience.
I agree. And then the next question kind of also ties into this well. With WCAG 3.0 on the horizon, do you see the guidelines becoming more explicitly focused on neurodiversity compared to the current 2.2 standards? And my understanding is that yes, they are going to do more to include and consider neurodiversity in the updated standards, but not to the detriment of any other user experience. There are additional considerations and elements as this field develops and people have more conversations around this space that will hopefully be rolled into 3.0. It's obviously in draft form, so it's still a working draft and they're still adding to it, developing it, discussing it, debating it hotly. But I imagine that there is going to be additional success criteria or kind of additional framing around things like, emphasizing cognitive load reduction, offering flexible content, clear structure, and other considerations directly for neurodiversity that also benefit other users and will offer robust and flexible experiences for everybody arriving at a web digital product.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just add to that we have a webinar archived on our YouTube channel specifically about some considerations related to 3.0. As Gianna said, it's obviously very much a work in progress, but if you want a little bit deeper dive, hit that up.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know that the governing body for the W3C and WCAG have content about this and have been talking about this and putting out blog posts related to this topic. So there's certainly a lot out there that you can read up on to give you an idea of where future guidelines might go with this and other considerations that might be good to take into consideration now. Let's see. And then I think we are right about at time, so good timing here. Thank you so much, Hope. This was a fantastic presentation today and a really important topic. If anybody has any more specific questions related to this, you're welcome to hop onto our knowledge base. We may have knowledge base posts that already answer it, but you can also submit questions there. You can also reach out to us directly on our various contact forms at our website, and we are happy to have a personalized conversation with you. And then otherwise, join us in the new year because we will be continuing our weekly webinar office hours series once we are back from break. So we will be back in, I think, the first week of January there. And I believe we're picking up our next webinar at that time. So feel free to get registered for that. And we would love to see you in 2026.
Yeah, thank you so much, Gianna. Thank you, Hope. That was super. Thanks, everybody, for spending some time with us. And we'll see you in the new year.
Oh, and if you have any suggestions about how to make the webinar more accessible, please feel free to reach out. We'd love to hear it. Please feel free to reach out via our website. There is an email. You can email us at everyoneaccessibleweb.com. We're pretty readily contactable through the website, so please just get in touch and we will take that into consideration for sure. We love feedback on anything related to the content that we're putting out here.
Yep. And happy holidays, everybody.
Happy holidays, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.